Good evening, everyone. I'm Alex Anderson,
And I'm Jessica Heber.
reporting to you live from inside Bouchard's Classroom News. Tonight we'll take a look at some of the events of the Cold War when Soviet Russia and the U.S. competed on a global scale for power. First, let's head over to Noah Job with some information on the Korean War.
Thanks, Alex. 10 years ago from today, June 25th, 1950, the Korean War started. The war was fought between South and North Korea. The South was the U.S., UK, and South Korea. The North was China, Russia, and North Korea. The war started because the conflicts of the two countries was communism and democracy. The president during the war was Harry S. Truman. His general, Douglas S. MacArthur, tried invading China and threatened to attack the U.S., and MacArthur wanted to fight them. But Truman fired for wanting to start a war with China. The line dividing the South and North Korea was the 38th parallel, also known as the DMZ, which means demilitarized zone. Just 2 days after North Korea invaded the South, the UN sent forces out to attack North Korea. The war still isn't over, and they still have conflict with North Korea today, but in July 1953, they signed an armistice that agreed to stop fighting for a while. Now back to our newsroom with Alex.
Thank you, Noah. Now let's hear about the Russians in the Cold War as Jessica Heber informed us on the USSR and their rise to power.
In 1917, two revolutions swept through Russia, ending centuries of imperial rule and setting in motion political and social changes that would lead to the formation of the Soviet Union. Joseph Stalin was one of the leaders of the Russian Revolution, who came to power after Vladimir Lenin died in the early 1920s and never lost the desire to spread communism all over the world. When Stalin was in power during the 1930s, people called it the Great Terror. Stalin was set on getting rid of anyone who he considered to be a threat or disloyal to him or his country. About 20 million people were sent to prison camps in Siberia, and as many as half of those people died in these camps. Nobody did anything about it, and when Stalin died in 1953, people continued on this tradition up until February 15, 1956. This is the day that Nikita Khrushchev makes his famous speech. Khrushchev denounced Stalin and the cult of personality he had promoted and the crimes he had done. After that, citizens started the de-Stalinization process, which led to the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1990. The Soviet Union broke into 15 parts, and it was then that the leader Gorbachev realized that he had made a big mistake by letting that happen, so he resigned from office. He left 15 newly developed countries to develop their economies alone. Alex.
Thank you, Jessica. Now let's head over to the other side of the world with Vanessa Bubakin on the reconstruction of Germany.
Thank you for that, Alex. Hi, I'm Vanessa Bubakin reporting live from Berlin, Germany. Right now, we are discussing the historical facts of the Occupational Zone, which at one point in history had been Berlin divided into 4 parts. The Occupational Zone itself was a plan about what to do with Germany after the war. The presidents of the United States and Russia had met and agreed to divide Germany into 4 parts. America then started the Marshall Plan. This plan was used to help Europe get back on its feet after World War II. Also in the archives was Winston Churchill's speech about the Iron Curtain descending upon Europe. This describes the division of Western powers and the Soviet Union territories. Then 1 year later, the Berlin blockade and airlift started. This event was the result of the Soviet Union attempting to limit the ability of France, Great Britain, and the U.S. to travel to their sectors in Berlin. Then in 1947, President Truman made a document now called the Truman Doctrine. This document established that the United States would provide political, military, and economic assistance to all democratic nations under a threat from external or internal authoritarian forces. Shortly after this, the release of the U.S. policy of containment was created. This policy was a plan to contain communism within Europe. That's it for now. Let's head back to the newsroom with Alex.
Thank you, Vanessa. We'll be right back with more on the Cold War after a quick break.
center of the Tootsie Pop?
Let's find out.
A 1, a 2, a 3.
Wait, how many licks did it take to get the center of Tootsie Pop? The world may never know.
Welcome back to IBC News. For those of you just tuning in, we're talking about some of the events that took place during the Cold War. I will now inform you on some of the major Cold War tensions. On August 13, 1961, people woke up with a wall dividing West Berlin and East Germany. People were not able to cross to see their loved ones for more than 28 years. The wall divided democracy and communism between West Berlin and East Germany. After 28 years, the Berlin Wall was no longer in effect, and thousands of people gathered to celebrate at the wall by swinging hammers at it and being serenaded by David Hasselhoff. An international diplomatic crisis occurred when Soviets shot down an American U-2 spy plane over USSR territory. They captured the pilot, Francis Gary Powers, forcing President Dwight D. Eisenhower to admit to the Soviets that the CIA had been spying on the USSR for years. After serving less than 2 years of his 10-year sentence, the US and USSR made their first ever spy swap and got Francis Gary Powers back. The space race was a very important competition during the Cold War. Each side wanted to prove their superiority of its technology, military firepower, and political economic system. On October 4th, Soviets launched Sputnik, or the first ever artificial satellite into space, followed by many other Soviet victories in the space race. The U.S. had some catching up to do and began their comeback when President JFK announced that they would send a man to the moon. On July 20th, 1969, Neil Armstrong became the first man to ever walk on the moon, winning the space race for the U.S. The arms race of the Cold War began after the USSR detonated their first nuclear bomb at a test site, ending the U.S.'s monopoly on nuclear weapons. The Cold War began and the race was on. Both countries fought to create bigger and more powerful nuclear weapons. The U.S. decided that any major attack by the Soviets would result in nuclear warfare. After the U.S. and USSR agreed to limit nuclear testing, the Soviets tested the Tsar bomb, the biggest nuclear bomb ever to go off. Due to its lack of strategic military value, the bomb is seen to be nothing more than an intimidation to the U.S. At the end of December 1979, the USSR sent thousands of troops into Afghanistan and immediately took over military and political control of Kabul and other large parts of the country. This began a 10-year attempt from Moscow to end the Afghan civil war and maintain a friendly socialist government along the border.
Thank you, Alex. Now let's take a look at the Cuban Missile Crisis that almost caused a nuclear war. Here's Heather Stranigan.
Wonderful weather we're having all day, huh?
Yes, it is.
Not for them. Bad day.
You know.
How about that USSR?
Not looking too well.
What's your favorite color?
Purple. What about you?
Probably green. Lime green.
Right, it's called. Interesting. Catch the game last night?
Oh yeah, yeah.
It was a good one.
Doing good. It's like 10 goals.
Yeah.
Insane. Hey, knock knock.
Who's there?
Banana.
Yeah.
Knock knock.
Who's there?
Banana. Knock knock.
Who's there?
Orange. Orange, you glad I didn't say banana.
No, you're fine.
folks, we're having technical difficulties. We'll be right back in a moment.
When I give you the thumbs up, say over to Heather in the Ukraine.
And you can take it with you.
Okay, now over to Heather in Ukraine.
Are we working our way backwards in coming against USSR for Crimea? I will be affected on a time injury refer as the Cuban Missile Crisis. First let me remind you of the readers at this time. The U.S. had President Kennedy, Soviet Union coalition, and Cuba's dictator was Fidel Castro. A Soviet attempt to install medium-range missiles in Cuba, keep on targeting targets in the United States with nuclear warheads, provoked a crisis in 1962, condemning the Soviets for deliberate deception. President Kennedy promised a U.S. blockade of Cuba to stop the missile delivery. 6 days later, Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev ordered the missile sites dismantled and returned to the USSR in return for U.S. push not to attack Cuba. This was the closest the U.S. and the Soviet Union came to nuclear war. This is Heather. Back to you, Alice.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you for tuning in to IBC News. I'm Alex Anderson.
And I'm Jessica Heaver.
You stay fresh, Bouchard's class.